The emergency sirens wailed across New Haven Colony as Admiral Corvin's war fleet approached through the darkness of space. 3 million human settlers watched their skies fill with the angular shapes of Andorian dreadnoughts, each one capable of turning their peaceful farming world into molten rock within hours. The colony had no defenses except for a single orbital station commanded by Alex Reed, a man who had spent 20 years protecting human settlements from pirates and raiders, but had never faced anything like this. Reed received the evacuation order from Earth Command at exactly 14:32 ship time. The message was brief and clear. All military personnel were to abandon New Haven immediately and fall back to the inner colonies. High Command believed the agricultural world was indefensible against the Andorian Empire's most powerful battle group. Reed stared at the holographic display showing enemy ship positions and knew that Earth strategists were absolutely correct. His 12 patrol ships and aging defense platform couldn't even scratch the paint on one. Andorian cruiser. The Andorian Empire had been systematically destroying human colonies for 8 months. They moved through space like a plague, leaving nothing but debris and radiation where thriving settlements once existed. The galaxy's other civilizations watched the slaughter with cold indifference. Some species even placed bets on how long humanity would survive. The Centauri Republic offered to accept human refugees in exchange for mining rights to Earth's asteroid belt. The Vegan Confederation suggested that humans should simply surrender and accept incorporation into the Andorian slave caste system. Reed had studied every battle report from the Outer Rim colonies. The pattern was always the same. Andorian forces would arrive, demand surrender, then destroy everything regardless of the response. Their weapons technology was centuries ahead of human capabilities. Their shields could absorb direct hits from humanity's most powerful missiles without even flickering. A single Andorian battleship could outfight an entire human fleet and still have enough firepower left over to glass a planet. The communication array crackled to life as Admiral Corvin himself appeared on the main screen. The Andorian commander was nearly 3 meters tall with 4 arms and skin that looked like polished obsidian. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world where only the strongest survived, and their entire culture revolved around conquest and domination. Corvin's voice sounded like grinding stone when he spoke in heavily accented Standard Galactic. Human colony designation New Haven. You will prepare for immediate bombardment testing. My fleet requires live targets to calibrate our new plasma weaponry systems. Your population will serve as adequate test subjects for weapon effectiveness measurements. Reed felt ice form in his stomach. The Andorians weren't even pretending this was warfare anymore. They were treating 3 million human beings like practice targets for their newest toys. He opened a channel to respond, but Corvin continued speaking before Reed could say anything. Do not attempt evacuation procedures. My ships have established orbital interdiction fields. Any vessel attempting to leave planetary atmosphere will be destroyed immediately. You have 1 standard hour to prepare your population centers for bombardment. We will begin with the largest city and work our way down to the smallest settlements. This process should provide approximately 14 hours of weapons testing. The transmission ended, leaving Reed alone with the horrible mathematics of genocide. 3 million people were about to die so that Andorian gunners could practice their aim. Earth Command's evacuation order suddenly seemed like a sick joke. There was nowhere to run and no way to fight. The defense station's shields might last 10 minutes under concentrated fire. His patrol ships were armed with weapons that couldn't even penetrate civilian Andorian cargo haulers. Reed made a decision that would change everything. Instead of following evacuation orders, he activated the station's emergency broadcasting system and set it to transmit on all galactic frequencies. Every species in known space would receive his message, from the mighty Centauri Republic to the smallest mining guilds in the outer spiral arms. He took a deep breath and began recording what he believed would be humanity's final words to the galaxy. This is Alex Reed commanding the New Haven Defense Station. In 1 hour, Admiral Corvin of the Andorian Empire will begin systematic extermination of 3 million human civilians. These are not soldiers or combatants. They are farmers, teachers, children, and elderly people who have never harmed anyone. The Andorians call this weapons testing. We call it murder. Reed paused, looking out at the beautiful blue world below his station. New Haven had been humanity's most successful agricultural colony, producing enough food to supply 12 other settlements. The colonists had spent 30 years turning a barren rock into a garden world. Children played in parks that their grandparents had planted. Schools and hospitals served communities that had never known war. We have requested assistance from every member of the Galactic Council. Our messages have been ignored or refused. The Centauri Republic told us that human suffering is not their concern. The Vegan Confederation suggested we surrender gracefully. The Trade Federation said that intervening would be bad for business relationships. Apparently, watching genocide is acceptable as long as it doesn't interfere with profit margins. The tactical display showed Andorian ships moving into bombardment formation. Corvin's dreadnoughts were positioning themselves to provide overlapping fields of fire that would ensure complete planetary sterilization. Reed's 12 patrol ships moved to intercept, knowing they were flying toward certain death but refusing to abandon the people they had sworn to protect. I want every species listening to remember this moment. Today you choose to let 3 million human beings die because helping us might be inconvenient. You stand by and watch while children are murdered because their deaths don't affect your trade routes or political arrangements. But remember this, every choice has consequences, every action creates reactions, and sometimes the prey you ignore grows teeth. Reed closed the transmission and ordered his ships to attack. The battle lasted exactly 7 minutes. Andorian point defense systems swatted Reed's patrol craft out of space like insects. The defense station's shields collapsed under the first concentrated barrage. Reed died at his post, but his final transmission had been received by every major civilization in the galaxy. New Haven burned for 3 days. When the weapons testing was complete, Admiral Corvin's fleet moved toward their next target. The galaxy continued watching in silence. But deep in the Sol system, beyond the orbit of Pluto, where no sensors could detect it, something ancient and terrible began to stir. Reed's broadcast had triggered protocols that had been dormant for centuries. Project Revenant was awakening, and humanity's true face was about to be revealed. The emergency session of the Terran Defense Council convened in the deepest bunkers beneath Geneva, 3 kilometers below the surface where even nuclear weapons couldn't reach them. Victoria Kane had served as Fleet Admiral for 12 years, but she had never seen the council chamber filled with such desperate faces. Holographic displays showed the systematic destruction of human colonies in real time. Red markers indicated destroyed settlements. Yellow markers showed colonies under attack. The few remaining green markers representing safe human worlds seemed to shrink every hour. Kane stood before the circular table where Earth's most powerful leaders sat in silence. The president looked like he had aged 10 years in the past week. The Secretary of Defense kept staring at casualty reports that climbed higher with each update. The Director of Colonial Affairs had stopped speaking entirely after watching the bombardment of New Haven. These were people who had dedicated their lives to protecting humanity, and they were watching their species march toward extinction. Ladies and gentlemen, we have lost 47 colonies in 8 months. Kane began, her voice steady despite the horror of the numbers. Current casualty estimates exceed 200 million civilians. Admiral Corvin's battle group is moving toward the inner systems, and our remaining fleets cannot stop them. At current rates of advance, the Andorian Empire will reach Earth within 6 months. The president leaned forward in his chair. What about the Galactic Council? Surely someone will intervene if Earth itself is threatened. Kane pulled up diplomatic files on the main display. The Centauri Republic has officially recognized Andorian sovereignty over all former human colonies. The Vegan Confederation is negotiating trade agreements for salvage rights to our destroyed worlds. The Trade Federation has increased shipping rates to human space by 300%, claiming that our territories are now too dangerous for regular commerce. They're going to let us die, whispered the Secretary of Defense. The entire galaxy is going to stand by and watch while we're exterminated. Kane nodded slowly. That appears to be correct. However, I have called this emergency session because we have one final option. Something that has remained classified at the highest levels for over 50 years. She activated a security protocol that sealed the chamber and activated electromagnetic shielding that would prevent any form of electronic surveillance. Project Revenant was initiated in 2387, following humanity's first contact with aggressive alien species in the Proxima system. The project was based on a simple premise. Humanity needed a weapon of last resort that could protect our species even if every other defense failed. The project consumed resources from 12 different black budget programs and required technologies that officially do not exist. Kane's fingers danced across the control interface and new displays appeared showing construction schedules, resource allocations, and technical specifications that seemed to violate known laws of physics. Hidden in the asteroid field beyond Pluto, at coordinates that only 3 people in this room know, lies the TFS Harbinger. This vessel represents 50 years of humanity's most advanced and dangerous research. The Director of Scientific Research frowned at the specifications. These energy readings are impossible. 0-point extraction at this level would require controlling fundamental forces that we barely understand. The Harbinger was built using technology reverse-engineered from crashed alien vessels, combined with theoretical physics that our scientists developed in complete secrecy. The ship exists in a state of quantum superposition, allowing it to occupy multiple dimensional spaces simultaneously. Its weapon systems manipulate matter at the subatomic level, and its defensive capabilities include temporal displacement fields. Kane activated another series of displays showing crew assignments and training records. 300 personnel have trained for this mission their entire adult lives. They have been psychologically conditioned to operate the Harbinger systems, which require neural interfaces that would kill ordinary humans. The ship's captain is David Stone, a veteran of our most classified military operations. The president stared at the technical readouts with growing amazement and horror. Why wasn't I informed about this project when I took office? Because knowledge of Project Revenant carries automatic authorization for its deployment. The moment you learned of the Harbinger's existence, you gained the authority to activate it. This is not a decision that can be delayed or debated. The ship is already beginning its journey toward the war zone. Kane's expression grew grim as she continued her briefing. The Harbinger is not just a warship. It is humanity's final evolutionary step toward becoming something that can survive in a galaxy filled with predators. The crew will be permanently changed by their integration with the ship's systems. They will gain capabilities that no human has ever possessed, but they will also lose parts of their humanity that can never be recovered. The chamber fell silent as the full implications became clear. The Secretary of Defense was the first to speak. What exactly is this ship capable of in combat? The Harbinger can destroy entire star systems if necessary. Its weapons draw energy directly from the quantum vacuum, giving it effectively unlimited firepower. The ship can phase in and out of normal space-time, making it nearly impossible to target or damage. Most importantly, it can adapt and evolve its capabilities based on threats it encounters. Kane pulled up gravitational sensor readings from across human space. The ship began moving 12 hours ago, when Alex Reed's final transmission triggered the automatic activation protocols. Deep space monitoring stations are already detecting gravitational anomalies that cannot be explained by known physics. The Harbinger's passage through space leaves distortions that affect nearby star systems. The president looked around the table at his advisors. And if we use this weapon, humanity survives. The cost will be measured in the fundamental changes to our species and our relationship with the rest of the galaxy. The Harbinger is designed to ensure that no alien species will ever again threaten human extinction. Once deployed, it cannot be recalled or controlled by anyone except its crew. Kane activated one final display showing the ship's projected course through space. Captain Stone and his crew are already beyond the point of no return. They will emerge in the war zone within 72 hours. When that happens, the galaxy will learn why humanity should never have been dismissed as harmless prey. The President signed the authorization codes that would officially activate Project Revenant. As his biometric signature was confirmed, automated systems across the Sol system began powering up weapons and defenses that had waited half a century for this moment. In the deep cold beyond Pluto, the TFS Harbinger continued its impossible journey through folded space-time. Its crew of 300 had already begun the integration process that would transform them into something beyond human understanding. Captain Stone felt his consciousness expanding as neural implants connected his mind directly to the ship's quantum AI systems. The galaxy had chosen to ignore humanity's suffering. Now they would learn what happened when Earth's children decided to stop playing by civilized rules. Deep space monitoring stations across 3 spiral arms began reporting the same impossible readings within hours of each other. Gravitational waves that shouldn't exist rippled through empty space. Stars flickered as something massive passed between them and distant observers. The laws of physics seemed to bend and twist in patterns that made veteran scientists question their most basic understanding of reality. Ambassador Thera of the Centauri Republic paced nervously in her private quarters aboard the diplomatic station, orbiting Galactic Council headquarters. She had spent 6 years studying human culture and history for her doctoral thesis, focusing on Earth's peculiar tendency to solve problems through increasingly creative forms of violence. The other council members dismissed her research as academic nonsense, but Thera understood something about humans that the rest of the galaxy had missed. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called after sensor networks detected what appeared to be massive gravitational distortions moving through space toward the war zone between humans and Andorians. Representatives from 47 different species gathered in the vast spherical chamber that floated in the vacuum between 3 stars. The artificial gravity generators created a shared environment where beings from different worlds could meet without environmental suits. Chancellor Voss of the Trade Federation spoke first, his crystalline body refracting light as he moved. These gravitational anomalies represent a clear threat to shipping lanes throughout the sector. Several of our cargo vessels have reported complete sensor blackouts lasting for hours. We demand immediate investigation and resolution. The representative from the Vegan Confederation raised her 4 arms in agreement. Our deep space arrays are detecting energy signatures that exceed anything in our databases. Whatever is causing these distortions possesses technology far beyond current galactic standards. Thera requested permission to address the council, knowing that her words would likely be ignored as they had been for months. Honored colleagues, I believe these phenomena are connected to the human-Andorian conflict. My research into Earth's historical patterns suggests that humanity possesses military capabilities that they have deliberately concealed from galactic observation. Laughter echoed through the chamber from several species representatives. The Rigelian delegate gestured dismissively with his tentacles. The humans are being systematically exterminated by the Andorians. They have lost nearly 50 colonies and their remaining fleets are completely outmatched. How could a dying species be responsible for gravitational distortions that affect entire star systems? Thera activated her personal display and shared classified files that she had obtained through diplomatic channels. Human history shows a consistent pattern of concealing their true military strength until threatened with complete destruction. Their records document over 5,000 years of warfare, including conflicts where vastly outnumbered human forces defeated technologically superior enemies through surprise tactics and hidden weapons. The Andromedan representative leaned forward, his metallic features reflecting the chamber's artificial light. You're suggesting that humans have been pretending to be weaker than they actually are? That their apparent helplessness against the Andorians is some form of deception? Not deception exactly, but certainly concealment. Humans have a documented psychological tendency to avoid conflict until they perceive existential threats to their species. When that threshold is crossed, they demonstrate capabilities that seem to emerge from nowhere. Admiral Corvin himself appeared via quantum communication link from his flagship deep in human space. The Andorian commander's forearms gestured aggressively as he spoke. The humans are vermin who die easily when faced with superior firepower. I have personally overseen the destruction of their colonies. They possess no weapons that can penetrate our shields, no ships that can match our speed, and no tactics that can overcome our numerical superiority. Thera studied Corvin's image carefully, noting signs of stress that the Admiral was trying to conceal. Admiral, have you experienced any unusual incidents during your campaign? Equipment failures, unexplained phenomena, or missing personnel? Corvin hesitated for just a moment before responding. Minor irregularities are normal during extended military operations. A few patrol ships have failed to report on schedule, but this is likely due to crew fatigue or equipment malfunctions. How many ships have you lost to equipment malfunctions? 17 vessels over the past week, but this is not relevant to Council business. The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. 17 Andorian warships had vanished without explanation while operating in supposedly empty space. Thera pulled up star charts showing the locations where gravitational anomalies had been detected. The pattern matched perfectly with reports of missing Andorian patrols. The Chancellor of the Trade Federation studied the data with growing concern. These disappearances coincide exactly with the gravitational distortions. Something is hunting Andorian ships in deep space. Thera activated another display showing energy readings from the anomaly sites. Whatever is responsible for these incidents is using technology that operates outside our understanding of physics. The energy signatures suggest matter-antimatter reactions at scales that should be impossible to control safely. Admiral Corvin's image flickered as his communication link was disrupted by some form of interference. When the signal stabilized, his expression had changed completely. Fear showed clearly in his alien features as he spoke. My sensor operators are reporting a massive gravitational distortion approaching our fleet position. The readings are unlike anything in our databases. The main display in the council chamber suddenly activated without authorization, showing real-time sensor data from Corvin's flagship. A massive void in space was moving toward the Andorian battle group, bending light around itself so that stars seemed to vanish as it passed. The gravitational effects were strong enough to affect ship navigation systems from a distance of several light hours. What is that thing? Whispered the vegan representative. Thera felt ice form in her stomach as she recognized the implications of what they were witnessing. I believe that is humanity's true response to the threat of extinction. They have been building something in secret for decades, waiting for the moment when their species faced complete annihilation. The gravitational distortion on the display suddenly accelerated, moving faster than any known propulsion system could explain. Space around the anomaly began to ripple and fold like liquid. Several of Corvin's patrol ships reported complete system failures as the phenomenon approached. Their position, Corvin's transmission, cut out entirely as his fleet's communication arrays were overwhelmed by gravitational interference. The last image showed Andorian crews abandoning their stations as their ships' hull integrity fields began to collapse under impossible gravitational stress. The council chamber erupted in chaos as representatives demanded explanations that no one could provide. Thera remained seated, staring at the displays and remembering her research into human warfare. She had studied their tendency to appear weak and harmless until pushed beyond their limits. Now the galaxy was about to learn what happened when humanity decided that diplomacy and restraint were no longer viable options. The gravitational anomaly continued moving toward the war zone, leaving distorted space and impossible physics in its wake. Whatever the humans had built in secret was about to reveal itself, and Thera suspected that the galaxy would never be the same once humanity showed their true face to the universe. The Battle of Kepler Station began at 9:15, Galactic Standard Time with Admiral Corvin's grand proclamation that echoed across every communication frequency in known space. His voice carried the confidence of a predator that had never encountered anything capable of fighting back. The Andorian battle fleet stretched across several thousand kilometers of space, 237 warships arranged in perfect formation to demonstrate their overwhelming superiority. Kepler Station represented humanity's last major stronghold, a massive orbital fortress that had taken 40 years to construct around a dying star in the outer reaches of human space. 300,000 military personnel and twice as many civilians lived and worked in the station's rotating sections. The structure itself was a marvel of human engineering, but its weapons and shields were pathetically outdated compared to Andorian technology. Corvin had arranged for the battle to be broadcast across the galaxy as a demonstration of Andorian military supremacy. Representatives from dozens of species watched from the safety of their distant worlds as the most powerful fleet in galactic history prepared to destroy the last significant human resistance. The message was clear: this is what happens to species that refuse to submit to Andorian rule. The Admiral's flagship, a massive dreadnought called the Bone Crusher, moved into position at the center of his formation. His weapons officers reported ready status on plasma cannons capable of melting through planetary crust. Shield operators confirmed defensive screens that could absorb direct hits from stellar coronal mass ejections. Every system aboard the fleet operated at peak efficiency. Today, the galaxy witnesses the final chapter of human resistance, Corvin announced for the benefit of his audience. Let every species observe how the Andorian Empire deals with those who dare oppose our natural right to rule. The humans will serve as an example of what happens when inferior beings attempt to challenge their evolutionary superiors. The human defenders aboard Kepler's station made their own preparations for what everyone believed would be their final battle. Commander Lisa Park coordinated the station's defensive systems while her engineering crews worked desperately to coax maximum performance from weapons that were already operating beyond safe parameters. Every man and woman aboard the fortress understood that they were about to die, but they were determined to make their deaths meaningful. At precisely 9:47 GST, space itself began to behave strangely. Stars visible through the main viewport started to flicker and shift position as gravitational fields warped light itself. Several Andorian ships reported complete sensor failures as their instruments tried to process readings that violated basic physics. The space between Corvin's fleet and Kepler station began to ripple like water disturbed by an unseen hand. Then the universe tore open. The fabric of space-time split apart in a jagged wound that stretched for several kilometers, revealing glimpses of dimensions that existed beyond normal reality. Energy poured out of the breach in colors that had no names and patterns that hurt to observe directly. Every ship in the area detected gravitational waves powerful enough to affect their navigation systems from hundreds of kilometers away. The TFS Harbinger emerged from the dimensional rift like a nightmare given physical form. The ship was enormous, stretching over 3 kilometers from bow to stern, but its exact dimensions seemed to shift depending on the viewing angle. The hull appeared to be constructed from some material that absorbed light rather than reflecting it, creating patches of absolute darkness against the star field. The vessel's shape defied easy description. Parts of it existed in normal space while other sections seemed to phase in and out of reality. Weapon ports opened and closed along the hull like breathing organisms. Energy fields around the ship caused nearby space to shimmer and warp, making it impossible to focus on the vessel's exact outline. Admiral Corvin stared at his tactical displays in complete disbelief. His sensors couldn't get consistent readings on the human ship. The vessel appeared to exist in multiple locations simultaneously while also being nowhere that conventional targeting systems could track. Energy readings fluctuated between 0 and levels that exceeded his instrument's ability to measure. "All ships, open fire immediately," Corvin commanded, his voice betraying the first hints of genuine fear he had experienced in decades. "Concentrate all weapons on that vessel. Destroy it before it can deploy whatever weapons it carries? 237 Andorian warships opened fire simultaneously, filling space with enough destructive energy to sterilize a small moon. Plasma cannons, particle beams, and antimatter missiles converged on the Harbinger's position in a display of firepower that had never been equaled in galactic history. The human ship absorbed the entire barrage without any visible effect. Energy screens around the Harbinger's hull seemed to convert the incoming weapons fire into something else entirely. Instead of being damaged by the attack, the vessel appeared to grow larger and more solid as it fed on the energy directed against it. David Stone stood on the Harbinger's bridge, his consciousness now permanently merged with the ship's quantum AI systems. He could feel every photon of energy that struck his vessel, taste the fear radiating from the Andorian crews, and sense the gravitational currents that flowed between stars. The neural interfaces had transformed him into something that was no longer entirely human, but the core of his personality remained focused on a single objective. "Return fire," Stone commanded, his voice now carrying harmonics that existed in multiple dimensions. Simultaneously, the Harbinger's weapons activated with effects that seemed to ignore the laws of physics completely. Beams of compressed matter struck Andorian ships and passed through their shields as if the defensive screens didn't exist. The weapons didn't just destroy their targets, they seemed to edit the enemy vessels out of reality entirely. Ships that were struck by the Harbinger's fire simply ceased to exist, leaving behind expanding spheres of energy that converted surrounding matter into pure light. Corvin watched in horror as his most powerful dreadnoughts vanished under the human ship's impossible assault. The Harbinger moved through space in ways that made no sense, appearing in multiple locations simultaneously while phasing through solid matter when convenient. The vessel seemed to exist partially outside normal spacetime, allowing it to attack from angles that shouldn't have been possible. "Retreat! All ships retreat immediately!" Corvin screamed into his communication system, but half of his fleet was already gone. The Harbinger's weapons grew more powerful with each shot fired, as if the ship was learning and adapting to optimize its destructive capabilities. The human vessel appeared directly beside Corvin's flagship, having crossed several thousand kilometers of space in an instant. The Admiral found himself staring through his viewports at weapons that seemed to bend reality around themselves. The Harbinger's main cannon pointed at his ship's command section, and Stone's voice echoed through his mind with terrifying clarity. "You wanted to test your weapons on human civilians," the transformed captain said, his words somehow reaching Corvin despite the vacuum of space. "Let me show you what happens when humans test their weapons on you." The flagship's shields collapsed under gravitational pressure that seemed to originate from within the ship itself. Corvin felt his vessel being crushed by forces that his instruments couldn't even detect. As his command center began to implode around him, the Admiral finally understood that humanity had been hiding something far more dangerous than anyone in the galaxy had ever imagined. The Battle of Kepler Station ended. After 37 minutes of combat, the Andorian Empire's most powerful fleet had been reduced to debris and fleeing survivors. The Harbinger held position near the human fortress, its presence warping local spacetime so severely that nearby asteroids began moving in impossible orbits. Every species in the galaxy received the same message simultaneously, broadcast on frequencies that shouldn't have been able to penetrate their communication systems. The galaxy changed forever in the hours following the destruction of Admiral Corvin's fleet. Emergency sessions convened on every major world as species leaders watched recordings of the battle that defied explanation. The TFS Harbinger had demonstrated capabilities that seemed to violate fundamental laws of physics, and every civilization now faced the terrifying realization that humanity possessed technology centuries beyond their own understanding. The Andorian Empire's response came first and fastest. Supreme Commander Thrax, Corvin's direct superior, appeared on every diplomatic frequency within 4 hours of the battle's conclusion. The proud warrior who had conquered 17 different species and ruled over 200 star systems now spoke with the trembling voice of someone who had glimpsed the abyss and found it staring back. The Andorian Empire hereby declares immediate cessation of all hostilities against the Terran Federation, Thrax announced, his forearms shaking as he read from prepared statements. We offer unconditional surrender and request mercy for our surviving military personnel. All Andorian forces are withdrawing from human space effective immediately. The broadcast shocked every species that received it. The Andorian Empire had never surrendered to anyone. Their culture considered defeat worse than death, and their military had conquered enemies with odds of 1,000 to 1 without hesitation. The fact that they were begging for mercy after losing a single battle suggested that the Harbinger represented a threat beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. David Stone materialized aboard the Andorian command ship through methods that their security systems couldn't detect or prevent. The transformation that had merged his consciousness with the Harbinger's quantum AI had changed him into something that existed partially outside normal space-time. He appeared in Thrax's private quarters as if he had always been there, his human form flickering between dimensions. Your surrender is noted but insufficient, Stone said, his voice carrying harmonics that made the air itself vibrate. The Andorian Empire will withdraw from all occupied human territories within 30 standard days. You will provide complete reparations for the destroyed colonies, including resources sufficient to rebuild every settlement and compensate every family that lost members to your war crimes. Thrax stared at the human figure that seemed to shift between solid matter and energy patterns. What assurance do we have that humanity will honor peace agreements if we comply with these demands? Stone's expression showed no emotion as he replied. You have the same assurance that you gave to the 3 million civilians you murdered on New Haven, the same guarantee you offered to the children you used for target practice, the same mercy you showed to the elderly and disabled people you exterminated for entertainment. The Andorian commander understood immediately. There would be no negotiations, no diplomatic discussions, and no mercy if his species failed to comply. Completely. The humans standing before him represented a force that could end Andorian civilization with the same casual indifference they had shown toward human suffering. Additionally, the Andorian Empire will submit to human oversight of all military operations for the next 50 standard years. Any act of aggression against human interests or our allied species will result in the complete sterilization of your home system and every colony world you control. Stone vanished without waiting for a response, leaving Thrax alone with the knowledge that his species now existed only because humanity chose to show restraint. The Supreme Commander began issuing withdrawal orders immediately, knowing that any delay might provoke retaliation that would end everything his people had built over millennia. The Galactic Council's emergency session lasted for 72 hours as representatives struggled to understand the new reality they faced. Ambassador Thara found herself suddenly elevated from an ignored academic to the galaxy's foremost expert on human capabilities. Every species wanted to know what other secrets humanity might be hiding and how they could avoid becoming the Harbingers. Next target. The fundamental question facing this council is simple, Thara explained to the assembled delegates. How do we coexist with a species that possesses the ability to destroy our civilizations at will? The humans have demonstrated technology that exceeds our understanding by centuries or possibly millennia. The Centauri Republic's representative nervously adjusted his diplomatic robes. What do the humans want from us? Are they planning to establish some form of galactic empire? Based on their historical patterns, humanity typically seeks security and autonomy rather than territorial expansion. However, they have shown a tendency to respond disproportionately to existential threats. The fact that every species in this chamber ignored their pleas for help during the Andorian campaign will not be forgotten. The Trade Federation's chancellor spoke through his crystalline communication matrix. Several human colonies have already requested negotiations for new trade agreements. Their terms are surprisingly reasonable considering their demonstrated military superiority. Indeed, humanity's post-war diplomacy surprised everyone with its moderation. Rather than demanding tribute or territory, human negotiators focused on establishing mutual defense pacts and expanded trade relationships. Species that had ignored human suffering during the war now found themselves offered partnerships that were genuinely beneficial to both sides. The Vegan Confederation, which had suggested that humans should simply accept slavery rather than resist Andorian conquest, received a diplomatic message that was both polite and terrifying in its implications. The Terran Federation appreciates the Confederation's previous suggestions regarding our conflict resolution strategies. We have decided to implement your advice by accepting that some species prefer to resolve disagreements through submission to superior force rather than diplomatic discussion. The message was accompanied by gravitational sensor readings, showing the Harbinger's presence in empty space just beyond the Confederation's outer colonies. The ship wasn't threatening anyone directly, but its mere presence served as a reminder that humanity could reach any target in the galaxy within hours if they chose to do so. Within 6 months, the galaxy's entire power structure had reorganized around the new reality of human military supremacy. Trade routes were restructured to pass through human space. Defensive alliances formed around the promise of human protection. Species that had dismissed humanity as insignificant now competed for favorable relationships with Earth's growing network of allies. The Harbinger itself became a source of endless speculation and fear. The ship appeared randomly throughout galactic space, never threatening anyone but making its presence known to civilizations that might be considering aggressive actions against human interests. Deep space monitoring stations detected gravitational anomalies that suggested additional vessels of similar capabilities, but no confirmed sightings were ever reported. Captain Stone filed his final report to Earth Command from coordinates that existed outside normal spacetime. His transformation had been complete and irreversible, turning him and his crew into beings that could barely be called human anymore. They had gained the power to protect their species at the cost of their own humanity, becoming guardians who existed in the spaces between dimensions. Mission accomplished. Stone reported to Admiral Kane through quantum communication channels that bypassed normal physics entirely. The Andorian threat has been neutralized and galactic recognition of human sovereignty has been established. The Harbinger will continue patrol operations to ensure compliance with peace agreements. Kane studied the sensor readings from Stone's transmission, noting energy signatures that her scientists couldn't even begin to classify. What are your crew's long-term operational capabilities? We no longer age or die in ways that normal humans would understand. Our consciousness exists partially outside linear time, allowing us to perceive threats before they fully manifest. We have become something that can ensure humanity's survival, regardless of what enemies might emerge in the future. The truth was both reassuring and deeply disturbing. Humanity had gained ultimate protection at the cost of sacrificing 300 of their best people to become something beyond human understanding. The crew of the Harbinger would spend eternity watching over their species from the dark spaces between stars, ensuring that no alien civilization would ever again threaten human extinction. Trade delegations from across the galaxy began arriving at Earth within months of the Harbinger's demonstration. The Regelian Commerce Guild offered exclusive mining rights to rare minerals in exchange for human protection of their shipping lanes. The Tau Ceti Manufacturing Consortium proposed joint technology development programs that would benefit both species while carefully avoiding any research that might threaten human military superiority. Perhaps most significantly, the Galactic Council officially recognized Earth as a major power and offered humanity a permanent seat on the governing body. The vote was unanimous, though several species privately admitted that refusing would have been tantamount to suicide. Humanity had proven that they possessed the capability to enforce their will through methods that transcended conventional warfare. The galaxy's academic institutions began intensive study programs focused on human history and culture, desperately trying to understand the psychological patterns that had produced such devastating military capabilities. Universities offered massive research grants for any scholar who could explain How a species that appeared so peaceful and cooperative had developed weapons technology that seemed to operate outside known physics. Ambassador Thera published her definitive work on human warfare patterns, which became required reading for diplomatic personnel throughout galactic civilization. Her conclusion was both simple and terrifying. Humanity possesses an evolutionary trait that causes them to appear harmless and cooperative until threatened with extinction. When that threshold is crossed, they demonstrate capabilities that seem to emerge from nowhere but have actually been developing in secret for generations. The book's final chapter included a warning that resonated throughout galactic society. The greatest mistake any species can make is to assume that human restraint indicates human weakness. Their willingness to coexist peacefully should never be interpreted as inability to defend themselves. The galaxy has learned that humanity's true strength lies not in their weapons, but in their choice to use those weapons only when all other options have been exhausted. As years passed, the galaxy settled into a new equilibrium based on the understanding that humanity represented a force that could end civilizations but chose not to do so. Human colonies flourished under the protection of agreements that no species dared to violate. Trade flowed freely through human space, and conflicts that might have led to interstellar wars were resolved through diplomatic channels rather than military action. The Harbinger continued its eternal patrol through the dark spaces between stars, invisible to conventional sensors but always present in the calculations of any species considering aggressive action. Stone and his transformed crew had become the galaxy's ultimate deterrent, proof that some prey species were actually apex predators who had simply chosen to hide their true nature until threatened. The galaxy had indeed frozen in terror when Earth's warship entered the battlefield. In that moment of absolute fear, a new age had begun where humanity's enemies learned the difference between a species that couldn't fight and a species that chose not to fight. The distinction had proven to be the difference between life and extinction for every civilization that had witnessed the Harbinger's terrible power. Earth's children had grown teeth, and the universe would never forget the sound of their bite.